Will there or will there not be a trade deal between India and the United States? I'm now joined by Alexander Slater, Managing Director of Capstone, a global policy forecasting and strategy firm. He's a former MD of the US-India Business Council. Mr. Slater, great to speak to you once again. Thanks very much for being with me. I guess the most obvious question is, when on earth is this deal going to happen, or is it not going to happen at all?
Hi, Vishnu. It's great to see you again, and thanks for having me here. Listen, I think that's the question that many watchers of the U.S.-India relationship are asking themselves. I think we've been hearing for several weeks now that a deal was in the offering, or at least an interim deal, which is what they had agreed to negotiate by this time, would be in place. But it looks like we're still waiting and watching. But again, I think news out of both camps is that it's close, that the two teams are aligned on trying to get to a deal, and so we're hopeful that it will be announced sometime soon.
It has to be, given where both countries stand, a mini deal at this stage. India's got huge concerns in dairy. We've got small farmers to protect. The entry of, for example, GM crops, genetically modified crops, is problematic. The introduction of American products into the dairy sector in India. There are cultural ramifications as well, particularly if some dairy items are made with products from cows, for example. So that's an issue of concern. India won't bend, but America seems very clear that these are areas or sectors which they want to get in on. So what's the meeting ground in some of these areas?
Listen, you're at a place where two very powerful domestic constituencies in each country are at odds. The U.S. seems to be pushing, as you say, for increased access for agricultural and manufactured goods to India, but India has concerns along the lines that you've outlined. The challenge here is that behind those concerns are two constituencies that are really either eager to sell their goods internationally or to prevent competition for their goods domestically. And it's hard to see where the rubber meets the road here, and I think it's showing you why making a deal is so challenging for these two countries, even though their larger strategic interests and even affiliations for one another would point in that direction. We'll see where this goes. I think the Trump administration obviously is insistent on a 10% tariff staying in place for all goods. That's what we saw in the UK trade deal, which we continue to think is a model for future agreements. The question is, what guarantees can I think the Modi government secure from the U.S. government that the sector-based tariff investigations that are underway, for example, those into pharmaceuticals, will not apply to Indian goods? And I think that's a key area for India, especially.
From an India standpoint, would India potentially gain on the basis of where America deals, China or Vietnam with tariffs? So if their tariffs imposed on China and Vietnam, if they end up being substantially higher than what India is given in terms of tariffs, could there be a benefit which New Delhi accrues?
I think that's a possibility. I think if you look at the countries that received letters yesterday indicating that there would be reciprocal tariff rates being imposed on August 1st if an agreement was not reached before then, are countries that generally, not all of them, but generally are deemed to be places where there are large Chinese imports to them, and then they sort of re-export those. And so if indeed tariffs are raised in those countries, it would make other parts, other countries that are low-cost producers more attractive for supply chains. And you could imagine that India would be one of those, provided that it too was able to reach an agreement with the United States that made goods from India have a different tariff level or lower tariff level. Now, the one caveat here is that India, the United States is traditionally India's #1 trading partner, but China is India's #2 trading partner. And the relationship between China and India is one where there's lots of exports from China to India, and then China uses those goods in part as components for things that are re-exported. This is how the iPhone assembly works. It's sort of changing now, where there's more, an increasing amount of the components for the iPhones are made in India. And so you just got to watch that, right? Because what the United States really is focused on through these trade negotiations is making sure that there isn't a leakage of what are effectively Chinese goods into the United States from other jurisdictions.
All right, Alexander Slater, great to speak to you. Hopefully we'll speak to you once this is all done. That should be sooner than later. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a short break. Coming up after that, very much the interview of the day. My colleague Shiv Arur in conversation with Smriti Irani. It's about her returning to television in a role that we've seen her many, many years in the past, but also about her politics and how she's sort of moving from role to role, as it were, while essentially being a quintessential politician. That's up next.